The clink of silverware against plates echoed through the dining room like a countdown to chaos. It was supposed to be just another family dinner, Mom's famous roast chicken steaming on the table, Dad cracking his usual dad jokes, and my little sister Emily, with her bright smile that always hid something sharper underneath. But as I reached for the gravy boat, cold metal snapped around my wrist. Handcuffs. My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped bird. Emily stood there, her police badge glinting under the chandelier light, her eyes burning with a mix of triumph and something darker, resentment that had been festering for years. "You're under arrest, Sarah," she hissed, her voice slicing through the stunned silence. "For embezzlement, fraud, and betraying everything our family stands for." The room froze. Mom gasped, her fork clattering to the floor. Dad's face drained of color, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Betrayal hit me like a tidal wave. My own sister, the one I'd protected since we were kids, dragging me down in front of everyone we loved. But as the front door burst open and her captain stormed in with his team, guns drawn and faces grim, he stopped dead. His eyes locked on mine, and slowly he raised his hand to his forehead in a crisp salute. "General," he said, his voice steady but laced with awe, "we're here on your orders." "Ma'am." The world tilted. Emily's grip on the cuffs went slack, her face crumbling like wet paper. How had it come to this? How had the sister I once called my best friend turned into my worst enemy? It all started years ago, in the shadow of secrets I never meant to keep. But had to, for reasons that seemed so clear back then. You see, Emily and I grew up in a small town where dreams were as fragile as the autumn leaves crunching under our sneakers. I was the big sister, always the shield, patching up her scraped knees, whispering encouragements during her school plays, and vowing we'd conquer the world together. Mom worked double shifts at the diner, Dad fixed cars until his hands bled, and we made do with hand-me-downs and hope. But when I turned 18, everything changed. I got accepted into the military academy on a full scholarship. It wasn't just college. It was a path to something bigger, a way to lift us all out of that scraping-by life. I aced the training, climbed the ranks faster than anyone expected. Lieutenant, captain, major. By 25, I was a colonel, leading operations that kept our country safe from threats no one else even knew about. But with every promotion came a heavier burden, secrecy. The kind that eats at your soul. I couldn't tell my family the full truth. Not the missions in dusty deserts, not the close calls with bullets whizzing past my ear, not the weight of lives depending on my decisions. To them, I was just Sarah, the office worker in the city, sending money home and visiting on holidays with vague stories about paperwork and meetings. Emily, though, she saw it as abandonment. "You're always gone, Sarah," she'd say on those rare calls, her voice tight with hurt. Like we're not worth sticking around for. I tried to explain in bits and pieces, the classified nature, the danger, but she pulled away, building walls I couldn't scale. And then 2 years ago, it all cracked open. I came home for Dad's birthday, exhausted from a deployment that left scars no one could see. Emily had just graduated from the police academy, her uniform crisp and her eyes full of fire. She was proud, fierce, the little sister all grown up. We hugged that night, laughed over cake, and for a moment it felt like old times. But the next morning, I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen, whispering about digging into Sarah's finances and something off with her bank transfers. My blood ran cold. The money I sent home? It came from hazard pay and bonuses, but to an outsider, those irregular deposits looked suspicious, like kickbacks or laundering. I didn't think much of it at first. Emily was just being protective, the overzealous cop in her kicking in. But as months passed, her questions turned sharper. Late-night texts. "Where's all that cash really from, sis? You hiding something?" I'd laugh it off, say it was overtime, but doubt crept in like fog. She started showing up unannounced at my apartment, flipping through mail, eyeing my locked briefcase with the military seals. "You're not telling me everything," she'd accuse, her face flushing with that old resentment bubbling up. "You left us behind, and now you're living some secret life while we scrape by." Heartache twisted in my chest. Didn't she see I was doing it for them? For the house we could finally afford without Dad's backbreaking? But Emily saw betrayal. She saw a sister who chose shadows over family. The final straw came 6 months ago. I was promoted to general, overseeing an entire division, the youngest woman in history to hold the post. It was a dream wrapped in nightmares, coordinating with intelligence agencies, rooting out corruption in high places. One op uncovered a ring of embezzlers in the defense budget, crooked contractors siphoning millions. I authorized the sting, but it hit too close to home. Emily's precinct was tangentially involved. A low-level officer under her watch was on the take. When the arrests went down, she blamed me. "You set us up!" She screamed over the phone, her voice raw with fury. "You used your fancy job to ruin good people, starting with my team." I tried to calm her, explain it was justice, not personal. But she hung up, and the silence that followed was deafening. That's when the real betrayal began. Emily went rogue. She hacked into public records, nothing classified, thank God, but enough to piece together a twisted narrative. My office job transfers? She spun them into evidence of fraud. The late-night calls from colleagues? Accomplices in a scheme. She built a case, convinced herself I was the villain who'd abandoned her for greed. And she did it all in secret, feeding tips to her captain anonymously, positioning herself as the hero who'd bring down her own flesh and blood. I found out through a whisper from a mutual friend in the force, a heads up that Emily was gunning for an arrest warrant. Rage boiled in me, hot and unfamiliar. How dare she? After everything I'd sacrificed? But anger alone wasn't enough. It needed a plan. Revenge, the cold kind that burns slow and true. I didn't go after her directly, no leaks, no smears. Instead, I pulled strings from the shadows. I arranged for her captain, a man who'd served under me years ago, loyal to the bone, to be assigned to her bust. I fed him the barest hint. Watch the family angle. It's deeper than it seems. And I waited, heart pounding with a mix of dread and dark anticipation. Every family call after that was torture. Mom chattering about Emily's big promotion, Dad asking when I'd visit. Emily's texts grew sparse, laced with ice. "See you soon, sis." Got some questions. Suspense gnawed at me like teeth. Would she strike at Christmas? A barbecue? No, she chose the dinner, that intimate trap where humiliation would sting deepest. As the day approached, I rehearsed my calm, the mask I'd worn for years. But inside, the wound festered. Betrayal from blood. It cuts deepest, leaves you questioning every shared laugh, every childhood promise. I loved her still, that fierce girl with pigtails and scraped knees, but love twisted into something sharper, the need for her to see, really see, the truth. Not to destroy her, but to shatter the lies she'd built around us. Justice, I told myself, as I slipped into my seat that fateful night, the roast chicken mocking our shattered normalcy. Little did Emily know the real arrest was coming, for her illusions. And it exploded in the heartbeat after the captain's salute. The dining room, once warm with candlelight and the scent of herbs, turned electric with shock. Emily's hand trembled on the cuff key, her eyes darting from her boss to me, wide with disbelief. "Captain, what is this?" she stammered, her voice cracking like thin ice. The officers behind him shifted uneasily, holsters clicking as they stood at ease. Not for an arrest, but for protocol. My captain, now Colonel Harris, a grizzled veteran with a scar across his jaw from a mission I'd pulled him out of, stepped forward, his boots thudding softly on the hardwood. "Stand down, Detective Reynolds," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "These charges? They're fabricated. And General Sarah Reynolds here? She's the one who authorized the cleanup on that embezzlement ring you were so eager to pin on her." Mom let out a choked sob, clutching Dad's arm as tears streamed down her face. Dad just stared, his jaw slack, pride and confusion warring in his eyes. Emily backed away, bumping into the sideboard, crystal glasses rattling like her crumbling world. "General? Sarah, how?" The word hung there heavy as lead. I stood slowly, the cuff dangling from one wrist like a forgotten chain, and met her gaze. Not with triumph, though part of me burned for it, but with the raw ache of a heart cracked wide. "Because I had to, Em," I said softly, my voice steady despite the storm inside. All those years, the money, the secrets, it wasn't betrayal. It was protection. From wars you never knew, from dangers that could touch you here. I nodded to Harris, who unlocked the cuff with a quiet click. He handed me a folder, declassified just enough, filled with commendations, photos of me in dress blues, leading briefings in rooms far from our little town. Emily sank into a chair, the fight draining from her like air from a punctured tire. I thought, "You left us. For some lie of a life. I wanted to make you pay, to drag you back to reality." Her confession spilled out in whispers. The jealousy that had rooted deep when I left for the academy. The loneliness of watching me succeed while she struggled. the desperation to prove she was the strong one now. Hearing it, fury flickered, but it was drowned by sorrow. We'd both been blind, me hiding to shield, her lashing out from pain. The revenge I'd plotted? It wasn't chains or ruin. It was this moment, the mirror held up to her rage, forcing her to see the sister she'd almost lost forever. Harris cleared his throat. Detective, this stunt? It's grounds for review. But the general here vouches for you. Says family blinds us all sometimes. He shot me a knowing look, the kind that said he'd seen betrayals mend on battlefields bloodier than this. Emily looked up, tears carving tracks through her mascara, and for the first time in years I saw the girl I knew, vulnerable, reaching. Forgive me, Sarah, I was so wrong. I knelt beside her, pulling her into a hug that smelled of rosemary and regret. We're even, Em, but no more secrets. Not between us. The family dinner stretched into the night, not with roast chicken cooling untouched, but with stories, mine unfolding like a long-held breath, hers of the precinct battles she'd fought alone. Mom wept with joy, Dad beamed like I'd hung the moon all over again. Closure came not in thunder, but in quiet admissions. The resentment aired, the love reaffirmed. Emily faced a suspension, a humbling lesson in jumping to shadows, but she emerged stronger, transferring to a federal task force under my quiet guidance, sisters side by side at last. As dawn crept through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold, I realized the true justice wasn't the salute or the dropped charges. It was the healing, the bridge rebuilt over the chasm of misunderstanding. And in that fragile peace, a hard-won wisdom settled. Betrayal born of love's blind spots can scar deepest, but revenge isn't in breaking the betrayer, it's in revealing the truth that sets you both free. Hold your secrets close, but never your heart from those who matter. Because family isn't perfect. It's the fight worth every tear, every twist, to keep it whole.